Morning, folks. Councilman Rasmussen here, coming to you with my update from our Smyrna Town Council meeting on Monday, December 2nd. First, the general updates, as usual. Lots of things going on. It's the holiday season. Hope everybody had a wonderful, safe, happy, and fun Thanksgiving. In the next couple of weeks, there's lots of holiday events happening here in town. This week, actually, there's quite a bit of stuff. Probably most importantly, our Veterans Ceremony is coming up. It'll be Wednesday night at the Opera House at 6 o'clock. That is a yearly event. Councilwoman Gott is in charge of it, where we honor veterans around our town, around our community, as well as veterans on our staff for their service. It's a really kind of a very nice event. There's some ceremonies that go along with it. We give out some awards, and if you drive around downtown, you will see the banners that are created. So each one of the people who are honored, they get their personal banner that's hung up on Market Street for a year, and then on Commerce Street we have the banners that list all of the people who have been honored in previous years. So we'll be getting to do that on Wednesday night. If you have an opportunity to come down to the Opera House, it's a really a wonderful event. So please join us. And then this weekend there's a couple of things going on. Most notably, there is the caroling on the square on Sunday. This is, I believe, the second year, maybe. I think we had we had some weather issues that prevented it from happening. But so that'll be happening in front of Town Hall again. Lots of stuff. If you want to find out about any and all of these things, make sure that you're on the Town Tidbits, the Thursday email newsletter that comes out, and go to the events page on the website. And you can find information on all of these, as well as lots and lots of other community events that are going on in and around our area. So make sure you take a look at that. Also to note, I've mentioned this previously, so yard waste collection is almost done. It goes through next week. So if you have yard waste and you put it in your yard waste bin, actually driving down the street today, I saw a big, huge pile of tangled vines on the side of the street. We don't pick that up. It has to be in the yard waste collection bin that you get from the town, and that collection will be going up through the end of next week. So if you have things that you need to get out, get them out now. Now, we do the Christmas tree collection that goes on after Christmas, but we will not be starting up general yard waste collection again until the springtime. So make sure you get those final things out and get that taken care of. I know that we did our last little garden cleanup last weekend, got everything cleaned out that we knew we needed to get cleaned out, and we're good to go at my house. So, as far as the council meeting last night, we did not have a public hearing or anything like that, though we did have a lot of items on the agenda. Surprisingly, it was actually a very quick meeting. I expected to be there. I told my wife when I was leaving, I was like, I'll probably be back 9:30, and was back just after 8 o'clock. So that was nice. I mean, everything went well. As far as some general things, so we get shared with us some of the updates from the town manager. I think I might have shown this. So the town manager provides the council with sort of a general update. It's kind of bullet points from each one of the department heads about what they've been working on over the last couple of weeks. Anything of note that we might want to see. They don't go over this whole thing in detail at each one of the meetings. It sort of lists out, hey, here's what the electric department has been doing. These little projects are getting done, or there's this sort of issue. Every once in a while, there's some stuff. So, certainly I think one of the big things we talked about was the power outage that happened a couple of weeks ago. That one, we were down for about 3 hours. It was on the 5th, the beginning of November. So that's certainly one where, it's always nice to get an update. They've ordered the new surge arresters so we can have them in-house rather than having to go out and find one if one of them goes bad. Stuff like that is just the kind of information that we get in this monthly update. That's really prepared by the town manager puts it together. He asks for reports from each one of the department heads to sort of make something, relatively succinct. It's a lot of pages, but a lot of it is empty space in here. So As far as general updates from council members, there really wasn't a lot. I think everyone was sort of came into this meeting knowing that we were going to have a lot of agenda items, and everyone sort of moved through that beginning of the meeting pretty quickly, and then we just jumped right into the old business items. So there were two on the agenda, the biggest of which was the FY 2025 budget. So I am, as a member of the Finance Committee, I gave a little update last week about the Finance Committee meeting and what was recommended to the town as far as the FY 2025 budget. The town manager presented some of the highlights from that budget as part of his presentation. The general things from that presentation, let me just I'm pulling it up right now. Sorry, it's taking a second to load. In general, hold on. We have a new system that we use now instead of BoardPack, and it's a little bit more cumbersome in my mind about how to actually go and look at documents. So the general, and it takes a long time to load. Well, this is failing on me. So I'm going to have to go by what I just have from my memory rather than reading the individual pieces. The general budget is about $40 million. Of that, $38 million and change is the budget that we have expenses set up for. And then we have about $1.75 million dedicated to go into our operating reserves. This is a really big deal, and something that I have to say I'm actually very proud that we're doing this. This is the second year that we're going to make significant contributions into our capital reserves. For many, many years, that didn't happen. In fact, as far back as anyone can remember, that didn't happen. It is also the second year that we are making sure we're meeting our funding obligations for our legacy pension plan. Those are two really, really big deals. They're both expensive. Pension's $1 million. We're dedicating about $1.75 million to go into those capital reserves. But there are two areas where if we don't put the money in, it just costs us more money down the road. So this is more forward thinking rather than just let's pay the bills this year and hope that something better happens. This budget really, I think, follows up on the 2024 budget, which was a really messy process. The 2025 budget was nowhere near as messy, but this 2025 budget continues the hard work that happened last year in making sure that we are meeting our obligations both for our needs today, as well as thinking about the future needs of our community. So I'm very, very happy with the budget that got presented. There were some cuts that needed to happen, some delay in hiring one position that was going to be a new position is not going to be filled. There are some changes that are necessary to the water, sewer, and electric and trash rates. Those costs for us keep going up, and ultimately we need to pass those costs on to people because we don't have the ability to shoulder all of those costs indefinitely. So a couple of those things in the end, the projection is that ends up being about 5% overall. Oh, I finally got the thing to load. About a 5% overall increase in projected utility rates. Now, most of that was going to happen already. Actually, very little of that is money that the town even keeps because we had our sewer rate was going up. We had already planned for a rate increase associated with that. And our electric rate, the PPC AOC rate, was already going up. We'd already planned for an additional collection in that. So we're actually not changing our electric rate, which is still going to be 0.1198 cents per kilowatt hour, but the PPCAC rate is going up by 0.00042. That ends up impacting, a little bit on everybody's bill. Probably the biggest one that people will notice almost immediately is going to be the trash rates are going up. from $31 a month to $33 a month. That is really driven by the increased costs associated with us doing bulk pickups. Every year the town does 2 bulk pickups, one in the spring, one in the fall. The costs associated with doing that over the last couple of years has gone up by $120,000. We used to budget about $90,000 for it. Now it's about $170,000 is what we're going to be spending on it in 2024. More people are utilizing that service, and the costs for our staff, the cost for the trucks, the cost to go out and tip those, basically to get rid of all that stuff that we collect, all of that is increasing, and ultimately means that we need to increase the collection rate that we do. There are a couple of other increases in the garbage area. The additional bin fee used to be $6. That's going to go up to $7. So if you have 2 garbage cans, you pay an additional fee for the second can of $7. And our bulk trash pickup rate. Normally, if you schedule to have, a couch picked up on the side of, out in front of your house or something like that, it's $50. That rate is going to go up to $75. And that covers our increased costs for staff and for tipping and all of the effort that goes into that. So you will see some changes on the garbage side, the trash side of it. In the end, and the sewer is probably the thing that you'll end up also seeing. Now that's a pass-through for Kent County. So our sewer rates are going up because Kent County's rates are going up, and we send those on to them. It is estimated about a 5% for an average household, and we use people who utilize 1 kilowatt of power and 3,000 gallons of water. That is an average household. Obviously, if you use more or less than that, then the impact on your bill will be different. But roughly projecting it's about a 5% overall increase for the utility costs. But because of that, we are able to collect enough money to not have to raise taxes this year. I think that is, obviously we did a very large tax increase last year. It was long overdue. But we did it in such a way that worked out that we hope that we wouldn't have to do a tax increase this year. I say all of that because the costs of the town are continuing to go up. Right? Inflation is a real thing. The consumer price index is a real thing. These are things that every year our costs go up, and we still have at least 1 year on one of our collective bargaining agreements, 2 years on another one. Those are significant staffing increases, costs that we are going to be bearing over the course of the next couple of years. So while we were able to avoid a tax increase this year, I would expect, if I were you, that we will see some sort of a change to the tax rate next year. Now, there's 2 ways that might happen. My belief is that the town should adopt the updated assessments that Kent County and Newcastle County are doing. We are 20 years past when we have done an assessment, and our assessments are not as bad as Kent County and Newcastle counties, but they're pretty bad. And the longer we wait to do that, the more out of whack our assessments become with the real the real value of property. So I think we need to adopt those. If we do that, everyone's taxes will change. We'll have a whole new tax rate because we'll have to adjust our tax rate to match up with the new total value of property in the town. If we choose not to do that, which is, I hope not the choice that happens, then we would ultimately have to make some sort of a change to our tax rate based on the assessments that we currently have. Either way, we've used up the funds that we were able to increase for the town with the large tax increase last year, and I think we'll be looking at some sort of a tax increase next year, at least to keep up with inflation. If we don't increase our collections every single year by at least inflation, then we're falling behind. I think that's the same of anybody else. If you don't get a raise that is at least 2.6% or 3% a year, then you're falling behind at home. It's the same thing that happens with the town. And it's either our tax rate has to go up or the tax base has to go up. We're not projecting any significant increase in the tax base for this year, though obviously we hope to see some of these big projects. We hope to see bigger industrial projects in the industrial park, things like that. Those can help raise the tax base in a way that makes it so we don't have to increase the tax rate. But without those kind of big projects, ultimately the tax rate is the thing that needs to get adjusted. So again, no change to the tax rate for this year, but expect to see that as a big part of the conversation when we get to the 2026 budget next year. And there were a couple of other little changes that we're doing in the fee structure. The return check fee is going up, the business license fee is going up, the reconnect fee. This is if your power is shut off and we have to go out and reconnect your power. It takes our staff time, especially after hours. We have 2 staff members that need to go out and they get paid overtime for that. So we are establishing a new after hours reconnect fee that's going to be $100. So there's some changes like that. Ultimately, those help drive a little bit of increases and help offset some of the costs for the town. But the vast majority of the town's fund comes from the utilities and from taxes. I ran the numbers last night in my head, and of the $40 million or so that we will collect, about $10 million of that comes from the taxes, about $2 million or so comes from all the other fees and things that we collect, and then the remaining close to $28 million is money that comes in through all of our utility sales. That's how we have to figure out how to balance all of that and pay the bills, pay all the staff, and keep planning for the future. But I think, again, the town staff did a really good job. Some strategic cuts, some strategic fee increases, things like that. And ultimately, we're able to present a budget that I think reflects a forward-thinking approach to the town's finances. 2 years in a row, I think that's really good. I hope, obviously, to see that continue on for many, many more years. And then ultimately, the town will be in a much better financial position down the road. So that's the operating budget, which was approved by the town council. We also have approved, as part of that, a capital budget. Capital projects are those things that are construction projects, if you think about it that way. This year, we have a number of different capital projects that are underway, mostly. There's some planning for utility extensions under North Main Street. There's extensions underneath Duck Creek that are necessary to get done. We have an electric circuit upgrade that is happening this year. That's something that has been in the works for a couple of years. We are working on a new well and treatment plant. It's something that the town needs to provide increased services, as well as meet the new qualifications and things necessary for filtration requirements. That is something that's in the planning phases. We're still trying to select a final location for that. These are projects that take multiple years. So this year it's finding the location, it's going to be doing the engineering, those sort of things on that project. And then it will be something that we actually look to hopefully get some state funding or federal funding to help offset, because it's a many $1 million worth of project in order to build a water treatment, a well house and a water treatment plant. We've got there's an electric infrastructure mapping, an ETAP project, we call it. Again, this is an ongoing project that'll be continued this year, that we've already got funding. It's already funded through our bond funding. We have our North Duck Creek's substation. This is a new electric substation. This is going to be probably 7 years or more until this project is done. We have just purchased a piece of property for where this electric substation will be. It's going to be basically the north edge of town, up against Route 1, where Route 1 and Route 13 cross up there. You know where it's at because the major power lines come right across it, and that's very limited places where you can put a substation because you need to be able to connect to the distribution lines. That project will now move into an engineering phase where we will have to do all of the design and the engineering. That's expensive, and it takes a couple of years to get all of that stuff done. And then it will move into a construction phase, which takes multiple years as well. The kind of stuff that you need to buy for an electric substation, it takes years to get. So you'll hear about that for hopefully not the next decade, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's at least 5 to 7 years worth of work until that new substation is online. But that's going to be necessary to make sure that we can meet all of the future electric needs of the community. And there's one parks project. We have a matching grant parks project. I believe it's about $150,000. And we have parks impact fees that we've collected that are ultimately going to be paying for that. So Not a huge amount of stuff that's planned on the capital project side. We had a lot of little things in 2024 that got finished, and now we're moving into some of these really a fewer number but bigger projects that are all many multiple years sort of projects. Some of which we have the funding in order to do the whole thing, and it's set and it's in motion. Other ones are the kind of things where we need to do a certain amount of work up front to determine what our costs and what the plan is. And then we are going to be going out looking for those federal grants, those state bond bill allocations, those sort of things that can help us to do those bigger pieces. Ultimately, we approved the capital projects budget as well. And that actually all went really, really fast. Fortunately, there weren't a ton of questions from other council members. The finance committee and the town staff did a great job putting all this stuff together, and it moved through relatively quickly. So it was nice. And we're done before this year. This is the first time in at least 3 years that we've had a budget approved before the next year began, which is great. That's wonderful. We're moving in the right direction in a lot of places. The next old business economic item was economic development incentives. There actually wasn't anything to report from this. This is an ongoing conversation about what do we do about the impact fees, fire and ambulance impact fees associated with the industrial park. There is, right now, as our fees stand after adopting the new ones, our fees are many, many, many times higher than anywhere else in the state, and the potential of that impacting economic development or a construction project is real. I mentioned the idea that the tax base needs to grow, so our tax rate doesn't need to grow. Well, really the places where our tax base are going to grow in a meaningful way that helps our taxes, it would be industrial projects. However, we also need funds for our fire and ambulance systems. So I think there's a balancing act, and we're trying to gather as much information from folks to ultimately make a decision whether or not we should provide some sort of an abatement to the in industrial projects. No movement on that. Still waiting on feedback from, I believe it was the Ambulance 64 on that. And then we moved into new business. So there were 5 different items on new business. The first one, there's a proposed resolution about the town's budgeting process, basically a statement that the town staff and the finance committee are the ones who ultimately put this together. It was drafted by one of the members of council. It has not been reviewed by the finance committee at all, or any other committees. So the proposal was to send it off to be reviewed by the finance committee to get as much impact and feedback on it as possible to make sure that it is not that it is worded correctly and everyone's opinion is considered in the drafting of something like this, rather than sort of a first draft from one of the council people. We had 3 different ordinances that were part of our meeting last night. The first one, which is 17-24, establishes a property tax exemption for individuals who are permanently disabled or totally disabled. I think this is a really good one. This is something that I did some research on last year. So Smyrna offers a property tax exemption for people that are over the age of 65 and below a certain income threshold. I believe it was, prior to this, it was $30,000 for an individual and $35,000 for a married couple. That income threshold doesn't include things like Social Security or railroad pensions, any federal funds that come in. So, which is actually much higher than almost every other town that we looked at. We have probably the most generous property tax exemption of anybody that I could find information for. But what we didn't have is the inclusion for people for property tax exemption who are under total disability. And almost every other community had that as part of their tax exemptions. So that was sent off to the Charter and Ordinance Committee. They came back with a proposal to add that exemption for totally disabled people to it, as well as actually even increase a little bit the income thresholds that we have to allow for it. So to make it even a little bit more flexible for people who are on fixed incomes to be able to qualify for a property tax exemption. The only real question that came up with this is how do we make sure that we verify that, you know, truly the property owner and the taxpayers are totally disabled? What process would we use to make sure that we're doing that? Kent County does this, and the conversation was that we ought to look at and adopt the system and that Kent County uses, because they've been doing it for a very long time, and they're known or thought to have a fairly robust system for doing that. So this is the first reading of that ordinance. It will come back to council 2 more times, so it won't be finally approved until the beginning of next year. But I think it's a good thing. I think it does even a little bit more for the members of our community that are on a fixed income, older members of our community, as well as those that are disabled in a way that impacts their ability to go out and earn. The second one was Ordinance 18-24. This one requires rental inspections and certificate of occupancy for rental units, even if they are occupied by family members. And things like this come to us because of people not doing something well or not doing the right thing. If you have a rental unit, you have to get a certificate of occupancy for that rental unit, you have to have that regularly inspected. And it has to meet all of the rental requirements that are necessary. The exemption that we have had for that is unless you are renting it to a family member. So people have abused that. They have come in and said, oh yeah, no, I'm renting it to my cousin, so I don't have to have it inspected, or something like that. And what we have found is then somehow, you know, a railing breaks or something happens and cousin is suing, and the town hasn't inspected that because they're family members. Or we've gotten the, you know, oh, they're my cousin, but they're not really even related type of people. They just don't want to have the rental inspection and pay that little $100 or $150 fee or something like that every time it changes over. So unfortunately, bad actors means that we have to make an adjustment to our code, because ultimately it's on us to make sure that if somebody is renting a property in town, that it actually meets those qualifications. So we are removing from that section of the code the exemption that if you're renting it to a family member. The only time that it does not, that you don't have to do that, is if the owner of the property physically lives in the building. Then their assumption is that they're going to keep it up because they live there, versus just renting out a house that they own to their cousin or something like that. Again, it's the first reading of that ordinance, so it will come back to the town council 2 more times before it is ultimately finalized. And then the third ordinance that we had, Ordinance 19-24, this one clarifies farm animals in town, basically. There are prohibited animals that you are not allowed to own if you live in town limits. I think most people know and understand this. This has been in the code for a very long time. You are not allowed to own and house outdoor exotic animals unless it's the kind of thing you buy in a pet store, like we have a snake and a lizard that live in terrariums inside of my house. They're considered exotic animals, but they're not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, like, if you want to have an emu living in your yard, or you want a llama, or you want chickens or ducks. And those are the 2 things that we probably get the most complaints about, because they are farm animals, they are not pets. And we all know that there are people who own chickens and ducks who live in town, and we get calls from their neighbors all the time. Ducks are pooping in my yard, chickens are running around in my yard, rooster is crowing in the morning. And we have not done a great job of enforcing that. So we need to do a better job of enforcing those restrictions, and that's going to start happening. So this change to the ordinance is really updating that says, hey, look, as of this date, we're giving everybody 90 days or 45 days or whatever it ends up being when we pick the final date, that you've got that much time to get rid of them. And then we're going to start cracking down on this, because it is a problem. It is a nuisance to neighbors. I understand, if you got chickens and they're super quiet and you get eggs, that's great. But if the guy down the street says you have chickens and they decide they want them and their chickens are running around in Main Street, which actually happens all the time, it becomes a problem. And like with most things, bad actors ruin things for everybody else. And this is another one of those things where, unfortunately, we have to apply the rules equally across the board as best as possible. And we need to start doing that with our ordinance preventing farm animals and things like that living in town. Unless you own more than 4 acres and you have a legitimate farm. That's different. So this is the first reading of that. We will see it 2 more times. The 5th item on the list was proposed impact fees for 2025. So our code requires that we update our impact fees across the board every year based on the consumer price index, which this year was 2.6%. So all of our impact fees across the board all need to go up 2.6% in order to match that CPI. So basically a long list, it's a couple of bucks here, it's a couple of bucks there, but that 2.6% increase is set for all of the town's impact fees. This isn't the impact fees that we collect for other people, like the ambulance or fire or the schools or anything like that. This is just the town's impact fees, and those are associated with parks, police, water, sewer, electric, those kind of things. That was approved. The new rates proposal was approved by council, and those will be in place for starting January 1st, 2025. And then the last thing that was on the list, this is one that has to do with an action by the state legislature. House Bill 206 in 2023 required the creation of police accountability boards. And so what the town is doing, we are going to have a formal proposal to reclassify what we call our Public Safety Committee into this Police Accountability Board. And there are certain requirements about who has to be represented on that board, like a member of the clergy has to be represented on that board, a member or a person or family member of someone who has been impacted by the judicial system or has to be on that board. The town manager and police chief is drafting up who the proposal would be for those members, and we'll ultimately probably see that at the next council meeting. This is a state requirement that we create this, and so we will go through that process and get it created, and it will begin meeting in 2025. So no action was taken on that aside from an update and letting us know that this is going to be an item that we're going to be seeing coming up pretty soon as a business item on our agenda. So that was a lot, but a lot of those things happened really, really quickly because we had an executive session, we were down in the executive session and then back out of that pretty fast, and the meeting was done in just over an hour. So a lot of different items, but ultimately most of them were sort of procedural type of things that are just kind of items that we needed to move forward on. The big one, of course, was the presentation of the budget, and again, I'm very pleased that we are going into 2025 with a budget that reflects the true needs of the town and plans for the town's future. I think that is a huge deal, and we need to continue doing that forever, right? We should be planning for our future forever because the future is always going to be there. I have this fear that we do a lot of really good work for a number of years, right? We start to build up significant capital reserves, things like that, and then someone's going to come along later on after, I'm not around to bang this drum anymore and say, well, we got plenty of money. We don't need to be planning for the future anymore. That's just not true. We're always going to need to be planning for the future of this town. There are always going to be future capital needs. They may not be building new water towers, but they might be replacing water towers, right? They may not be building new electric substations, but they might be replacing electric circuits and things along those lines. They're always going to be there, and things like impact fees can't pay for a lot of that. Impact fees can pay for new services. They can't pay to replace the sewer line on South Street or Commerce Street or Lake Drive. That is money that the town has to have ourselves to pay for it. And if we're not planning for each one of those things, then it's just more and more and more debt. So We've done a good job now. It's 2 years of paying all of our bills and planning for the future. We need to keep that up for as many more years as possible, for ideally for forever, because it's always going to be there. So, but thanks again to the other members of the finance committee and to the town staff for doing a ton of work getting this done. It's much easier this year. 2026 ideally will be even easier because we've started to build these things into the budget process rather than having them be afterthoughts, which I think is really, really important. So. In general, that's the update from the council meeting. Remember the big things coming up. Check out the events calendar on the website. Check out the Town Tidbits, the Thursday email. And on Wednesday night at the Opera House, we will be having our Veterans Ceremony. It's a fantastic event. All the members of council will be there. Come out and join us, celebrate some of the members of our community who have served our country. So. Thank you, as always, to everybody. We will have one more final council meeting at the end of the year. That one will be on December 16th, so 2 weeks from now. But if you're not able to attend that, then happy holidays. Take care, everyone.